The 1920s and 30s were a very confusing time in America's infancy. While the 20s were a time of great triumph and the art depicted hopeful futures and a time to rebuild and better ourselves, the 30s were a mass tragedy, and we see this being conveyed through music, art, photography, and literature. Photography during this era was quite telling about the living conditions. The photography during the 20s showed a steady incline of wealth, people wearing fancy clothing posing next to their brand new cars. This is completely contrasting the photography in the 30s. This picture in particular stands out. You most likely have seen this picture before. It's a magnificent depiction of life in 1932. There's 11 men in this photo in raggedy clothing having a lunch break. These men were positioned about 850 feet up on a metal pole no wider than a foot. Little did America know that this would become the average worker's living conditions for the next 8 years to come. That would be if they were lucky enough to land a job in this day and age. The hand-drawn art from this time period showed people generally unhappy with their standard of living at this point in time. A good majority of the art during this decade was heavily based around work. These photos were either a portrayal of unsatisfied labor or the mental impact that it causes. Music was flourishing in the 1920s. If it weren't for the Harlem Renaissance, music wouldn't have grown to such an overwhelming capacity that we know it as today. Here is a list of popular musicians that rose because of the Harlem Renaissance that I ripped straight from Wikipedia. The unique sounds they were able to produce attracted people from thousands of miles to listen to their magnificent musicians and inspired new ones to make their own music. The blues and jazz, which were discovered during this time, were the building block for the invention of rock, rap, hip-hop, and countless other genres of music that we know today. Musicians like Louis Armstrong have paved the way for future generations and have inspired many other people to give music a shot. When the Great Depression struck, music gave an outlet for artists who wanted to let out their emotions and, for lack of a better term, complain, and they were allowed to. In 1931, Bing Crosby released a song titled "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?"
Brother, can you spare a dime?
Which quickly became a sensation because it gave people something to relate to, something they had in common. To answer the question, the art in the 1920s and 30s showed us that it was a great time with widespread success, followed by the darkest time in America's economic history for a vast majority of the population.